Americans are asking, who attacked our country? The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda. They are some of the murderers indicted for bombing American embassies in Tanzania and Kenya and responsible for bombing the USS Cole. Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
Everybody was eager to go to war. Our country had been attacked. More than 3,000 people died on September the 11th, 2001. And when the president got on television and said, "You wear a uniform, get ready," and our people were ready.
This is the story of our 37 West Virginian heroes that have fallen since the September 11th attacks on America. Through their family, friends, and those they have served with, their story is not forgotten. Through their actions, heroes were born, and through our remembrance, their sacrifices live on forever. Just months after 9/11, West Virginia lost its first son. Special Forces soldier Sgt Gene Vance Jr. was killed in action by a gunshot wound on May 19, 2002.
Sgt Gene Vance Jr. Was a member of the 2nd Special Forces Battalion. He was actually in the headquarters element of the 2nd Battalion, and he deployed to Afghanistan with the 2nd of the 19th. And he was out on a mission. He was a linguist and spoke Farsi, and was out way in the wilderness of Afghanistan and took a bullet down through his bulletproof vest he had on, and he actually bled out before medevac helicopters and stuff could get to their location to try to medevac him out. And so he became the first casualty of the West Virginia National Guard.
On June 12, 2002, West Virginia lost its first daughter, Air Force Sgt Anissa Shara. She was the first female in the entire U.S. military lost in the War on Terror, and the first airman. As a loadmaster on a Special Operations cargo plane, her aircraft went down shortly after exfiltrating a Special Forces team from deep in the enemy territory. The plane reportedly went down due to mechanical failure, yet her actions saved the lives of 7 others on board. Following the footsteps of her grandfather and her father, Sgt Shara represents a long line of family tradition of answering the call of duty.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
On March 19th, a multinational coalition led by U.S. forces began the offensive. America was now at war on 2 fronts. The liberation of Iraq had begun.
In early January in the West Virginia hills, 13
Private First Class Richard W. Hafer was the first West Virginian killed in Iraq on November 15th, 2003. He was killed when 2 Black Hawk helicopters crashed in Mosul, while clearing Iraqi Army strongpoints missed during the initial U.S. invasion in March, 8 months earlier. Private First Class Hafer was lost shortly after his 21st birthday. He proudly served with the elite 101st Airborne Division.
When our military leaders and our president decided that we were going to go, then we went with the intentions of overthrowing Saddam Hussein and destroying his army and putting freedom into the citizens of Iraq. And we were successful in doing that. And you know, when our soldiers pulled him out of that rat hole that he was hiding in, that was a moral victory for everybody. And I think it went back even to the war in Kuwait. You know, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, because a lot of people would have liked to have done that at that point in time. And as everyone knows, the war didn't turn out to be a war against 2 armies. It turned out to be a guerrilla warfare of people hiding in the cities and attacking rather than fighting on a battlefield. They learned the lesson in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, that you could not take the American military on a battlefield and do anything except get wiped out.
On December 13, 2003, U.S. forces captured Saddam Hussein cowering in a small hole outside Tikrit, Iraq, a long fall from the palaces his tyranny once represented. The capture of Hussein turned the tide of war from fighting the Iraqi army to defending the Iraqi people in the middle of a civil war amongst rival insurgents and jihadists. Staff Sergeant Roger C. Turner was fatally wounded by an enemy he never saw. As a mortar round fell in his sleeping quarters, on February 1, 2004, the Persian Gulf veteran became the first West Virginia service member killed in a mortar attack in Iraq. Turner was a vehicle mechanic assigned to the 4th Infantry Division. Their mission was to secure the largest U.S. military base in Iraq, Camp Anaconda, also known as Balad Air Base. Specialist Ernest Harold Suffin was fatally wounded on March 11, 2004. There are conflicting reports of how and where he received his wounds. However, both versions confirm he was on a reconnaissance mission collecting critical intelligence for his unit, the 25th Infantry Division. He was the second of 3 Wood County natives that were lost in just a 3-month period. Specialist Danny B. Daniels II was killed when ambushed on July 20, 2004. The famed 89th Military Police Brigade was responsible for training Iraqi police and security forces. His vehicle was securing the rear in a convoy when it was targeted in Baghdad. 7 days after Specialist Daniels was killed, Sergeant DeForest Talbert's Humvee was hit by IED in the area of Balad. Talbert's only son was 3 at the time.
My name is Frances Hamlet, and Sergeant Talbert was my boyfriend and my son's father. We met in 2000, and we came to West Virginia State at the same time. We met the first week of school, and we were just good friends, and then we started dating. D enjoyed playing basketball, football. He enjoyed dancing, playing video games, being around his family. He was a good person. He was a good father. He loved his family. He only joined the military to better us. He was, he just wanted to be a good father.
DeForest Talbert deployed with the 150th Armored Cav. They deployed to Iraq and did not have all of the up-armored Humvees and the right equipment to go out on patrols and do their missions. So they had sandbags and plywood and stuff built into the back of a truck with machine gun, and he was the gunner and was hit with an IED.
My son was 3 years old at the time, and basically it was hard because I didn't know how to tell my son that his father was killed, and I didn't know what to tell him at all. I was just hurt. It was just a bad time for us.
Sergeant First Class Odie McVeigh fell victim of illness while serving in Iraq and was lost on November 7, 2004. He was serving with the 706th Transportation Company, which was instrumental in the logistics mission in Iraq. He was evacuated shortly before his death and passed away back home in West Virginia. Sergeant First Class McVeigh was a Vietnam veteran who rejoined the military after 9/11. He was a father, son, husband, and true patriot. As tensions rose and views changed back in the U.S., the media maintained its focus on Iraq. Meanwhile, the violence in Afghanistan was climaxing, and U.S. forces were still taking casualties while protecting the Afghan people. Lance Corporal Justin T. Thacker of the 2nd Marine Division joined the Marines when he answered the call to duty after the 9/11 attacks on America. He was killed on June 24, 2004 in Afghanistan, 3 weeks into his second tour. While returning from an observation patrol on the heavily disputed Pakistani border, they came upon enemy fighters preparing an ambush. Lance Corporal Thacker and 2 other Marines engaged 12 Taliban fighters, saving the lives of other unsuspecting coalition forces. Sergeant Bobby Beasley was killed on August 7, 2004. He was hit by an IED south of Kabul, Afghanistan, while providing security and preparations for the Afghan people's first free election. He was the first Virginia National Guard member killed in action since World War II. Sergeant Beasley called Inwood, West Virginia, home. He died securing freedom for America and Afghanistan. In April 2004, the killing and mutilation of 4 U.S. contractors sparked the deadliest battle yet. Enemy insurgents posted video of the Americans being dragged through the streets and hung from a bridge while the bodies were burned and desecrated. This changed the humanitarian aid role from Marines in the area to conducting raids against the insurgents responsible. The events that followed escalated to become the most significant battle in Iraq, Fallujah. Corporal Joshua Wilfong was raised on a small farm in Walker, West Virginia. On April 30th, 2004, he was killed by small arms fire, becoming the first West Virginian lost in the Battle of Fallujah. Corporal Wilfong was the 3rd Wood County son lost in less than 3 months. Lance Corporal John T. Byrd II was killed on October 30th, 2004, when a suicide bomber drove his car into his vehicle. He was killed along with 7 other Marines. The violence and presence of insurgents increased in Fallujah during this time. Lance Corporal Byrd was part of the 1st Marine Division. Corporal Byrd and his wife were expecting his first child when he was killed. Lance Corporal Bradley L. Parker suffered a fatal gunshot wound during the 2nd major assault on Fallujah, November 15, 2004. Lance Corporal Parker was part of the 1st Battalion, 8th Marine Regiment, who led the 2nd Marine Division in Operation Phantom Fury. This effort to rid Fallujah of remaining insurgents, including the infamous group ISI, now known as ISIS. The operation was the heaviest urban combat the U.S. Marines had experienced since the Vietnam War. Lance Corporal Parker's battalion suffered 17 killed in action and 102 wounded during the first 3 weeks of fighting in Fallujah. Corporal R.J. Mendez II, a West Virginia native and proud Marine, was killed during fierce fighting in Fallujah on November 10, 2004. Jimenez was only 21 and an accomplished rifleman in the 2nd Marine Division. It was brave men like Jimenez that turned the tide of war for the U.S. forces. Staff Sergeant Darren D. Van Komen lost his life on December 21, 2004, just 4 days before Christmas. Staff Sergeant Van Komen was killed in the dining hall when a gunman with a suicide vest entered the facility and then exploded the IED as he was killed by U.S. forces.
My name is Jammie Richardson. I'm the mother of Corporal Brian James Richardson. I call Brian my wild child. He was a daredevil. He would try anything. He was sweet and lovable. He was a very good little boy and adorable. He loved to hunt and fish. He joined in 2000. He joined a reserve unit. And when 9/11 happened, he was ready to go. He actually didn't go to class for over a week, thinking his unit would be deployed. And he was very disappointed that they didn't deploy at that time, but they didn't have a full battalion. And he finally got lined back up and went back to school. He actually went to college right out of high school, went to WVU and into the engineering program, but left to join the Marines and go to boot camp. I don't know what made him decide definitely to do it. I know he came home from school one weekend and told me he was joining the Marines. And I said, "No, you're not." He said, "Yes, I am." I said, "No, you're not." And I said, "Why would you want to join?" You know, we weren't a military family. I had a brother that had served in the Army. And he said, "I want to be a Marine." I said, "Why don't you join something else to pay for college?" He said, "I want to be a Marine." I said, "Well, why, Brian?" And he just looked at me, and his words to me were, "If people like me don't sign up to do it, who's going to?" I know they were patrolling. They were in the area of heat. He was the communications guy. He handled all the radio and all that. And I've been told that the night he was killed, he wasn't supposed to be there. He volunteered to fill in for someone else. He and 3 other guys were in a Humvee that hit an IED. And the other 3 were injured. Brian was the only one that was killed. At the time, I worked for my brother, and he would stop by early mornings to drop off paperwork. And I remember hearing the knock at the door and looking at the clock. It was 5:30, and thinking, wow, you know, he's here awful early this morning. And got up and went to the door, and there were 2 officers there. And I kept thinking they're looking for someone else. And but they were very professional. They were very compassionate. Brian was actually engaged, and I asked them to go with me to her house, and they went so we could tell her. It was, you know, they kept telling us no news is good news, but you don't realize exactly what that means until you have someone at your door. It's one of the guys from Brian's unit took this flag to Iraq with them to fly there and to bring home and back to their headquarters. The night that Brian was killed, he took the flag and covered Brian up. And when they came back, he wanted me to have the flag. So it took him a while. It took him 10 years almost, but they got it back to me this summer. It means a lot to me. He was honest, hardworking. He was just a very unique individual with always had a smile on his face. We did set up a scholarship fund. Brian's older brother, Pat, wanted to do that when Brian was killed as a way to honor him. We got that set up, and Patrick was going to manage that. Then, of course, 10 months later, we lost him. It's called the Corporal Brad Richardson Scholarship Fund, but it's given in memory of both my sons. He was a natural Marine. He didn't like a lot of the bureaucracy and the red tape, but the actual philosophy of the Marine Corps, the actual being a Marine, it was amazing to see him, and he was a beautiful Marine. When he put his uniform on, those dress blues, he was gorgeous. And it was just natural to him. The guys, they loved him, you know, and he did anything they needed done. I've never questioned his death because I know that's what he was meant to do.
Specialist Brian C. Ulrich, nicknamed Scotty, was killed by IED on June 5th, 2005.
I'm Barbara Ulbrich. I'm Scotty's mother. He was an awesome young man. He thought about everyone else all the time, never about himself. He was an A student all through school. Went to Marshall, and he had either 12 or 14 hours remaining to get his degree. He was majoring in criminal justice. It was after 9/11. He said, I've watched all this. He said, I can't stand it any longer. I've stood back. He said, I have to go defend our country. And I'm going. He said, when I get back, I will finish my degree. And there was no talking him out of it. And he went to Fort Knox for his boot camp. For years, we'll start out months and years at a time. We would have no idea where he was, what he was doing. We'd just have to address an envelope with his name and put it inside another envelope addressed to an APO address, and then they would send it to wherever he was, supposedly. We don't know if he ever received mail from us or not. But the only thing we know the only thing the military would say is he's alive and receiving his paycheck. That's the only thing they would tell us. Well, my son, he really liked the sound of that. I want to do this secret stuff, you know. He would tell me constantly, I'm not in danger. I'm perfectly safe. He would tell me when he was going out on a mission and we'd have no contact with each other. But of course, he couldn't tell me where he was going, what he was doing. His major in Iraq happened to be going by the outhouse one day. There's Scotty, like naked, with his gun sitting on the pot. He said, Brick, what in the hell are you doing? I'm taking a shit, sir. He said, get your clothes on and get out of there. But you'd have to know Scotty. They came to a canal and there was no road across it or bridge or anything. And the stories that I've been told, the sergeants and whomever else was in charge were looking at maps trying to figure out where they could go to get across the canal. And Scotty saw a bulldozer and he ran over to it and climbed up on it and got it started. And when they heard this bulldozer, they all turned around and start running toward him and said, Brick, what the hell do you think you're doing? He said, sir, I'm a West Virginia coal miner and I'm going to build us a road. And he took that bulldozer. I have pictures where one of his sergeants was up on it with him. Actually, one of the young men that died with him was on the dozer with him. And he cut a road across the canal, and they were able to finish their mission. I had received a letter from him asking for pictures. He said, I'm tired of looking at sand. He said, I want pictures from home, Mom. So his sister Beth and I went to Pocahontas County. And that entire day we had been everywhere in Pocahontas County taking pictures of his favorite places. We went down to the Greenbrier River and took pictures. We took pictures at Droop Mountain Battlefield, at Beartown, pictures of our camp, pictures of places he played as a little boy up there. And on our way home, Beth and I both just had a strange feeling, and neither one said anything to the other one. And we get home, and I was told that earlier in the day, some military people were here looking for me, that they'd be back about 7 o'clock that evening. And my first thing I did was ran to the church, not thinking that church on Sunday was early, and it was already over. So I just went to one of our elders' homes and said, I need help, the military's coming, and don't know why. So a few minutes after 7, a car pulled in. A couple of guys get out and they come in. They said, ma'am, we're here to inform you. I said, no. Ma'am, we're here to inform you. I said, no. And that went on several times. I didn't want to hear what they had to say. And finally, he just, one of them just went on and said, "We're here to inform you that your son was killed today in Iraq." They told me that his Humvee had been blown up with him in it. And that's what we thought for a long time, until the military met with us in Colorado and told me that he was in the most dangerous place there was, where the most action was going on, and that it was not his Hummer that was blown up. I think it was his captain's. And they had just stopped to see what was going on and was walking around. And a roadside bomb was exploded, and he and 2 other young men lost their lives.
Lance Corporal Adam J. Crumpler was killed on June 18, 2005, by a fatal gunshot wound during Operation Spear in Corrabla, Iraq.
Well, the operation is in the early stages right now, and I can't talk too much about the specific details going on, but I can tell you that it's another part of our continuing effort to keep up the pressure on the insurgency, and in this particular area, it's to knock down that foreign component to the insurgency and to focus on people that will be coming across the border from Syria to do harm to Iraqis deeper into Iraq.
On the day Crumpler was killed, his battalion saved the lives of 4 Iraqi men who were being held captive by insurgents. The Marines also found and destroyed several weapon caches and IEDs.
I'm Emma Johnson, and I'm Lance Corporal Crumpler's grandmother. Adam was born 3 months premature to a diabetic mother, and he fought several months in an incubator to live. And of course he survived and became a big rascal, and he was really a joy. And when he got in high school, he decided to start skipping, and he would ride the bus to school, get off, walk up to the road, catch the KRT bus, go to town, go to movie, get something to eat, and ride the bus back. And then when the school bus run home, he'd come in carrying that book bag like he'd been to school all day. So he didn't know that the school called me. So the next morning I set the alarm and I got up and I said, "I'm gonna take you to school today." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Oh, I just want to take you." I went with him. I went from class to class. I sat between him and the door. And I thought I'd embarrass him, and he just stood up and said, "Hey kids, this is Grandma. She started back to school." He got his operators, and I had a Blazer. And we fixed it up and gave it to him. Well, he worked, plus going to school, and that was a bad mistake because that's another time he started skipping. But every weekend, he'd call me, "Grandma, can you call Timco," which is the wrecker? "Where you at?" "Well, there's a cemetery back here on the hill," but they couldn't get to him because the Blazer was a big old ravine, and the front wheels was over here and the back wheels over here. And they couldn't get up there, so they rocked and rocked and rocked till they got it out. Then another time he called me, he was up his holler and it rained, and he moved over to look past the car, and his front wheel dropped down in the end of a culvert. So I had to call Timco. So he worked to pay Timco. I was at work, and my supervisor, he said, come over and he said, "Oh my Lord, did you hear they bombed the Twin Towers?" And then when Adam come home, he said, "Grandma, did you hear what happened?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, that made up my mind. I'm going to the Marines just since I get out of school." They arrived over there February the 8th. And he called me on Thursday before he was killed on Saturday. And they were getting ready to do Operation Spear, which is one he was killed in. And he said, "Grammy, I've got 4 more operations, and then we'll start training the ones coming in to do what we're doing, then I'll be home. And he got killed on Saturday. They were clearing houses, and they found a lot of hostages and like bombs and all that stuff in some of the houses. And the one he was clearing, the first floor was clear, nobody there. And he was the rifleman, and he was the first to go up the stairs. And when he got to the top step, the insurgent ran out of a room and just opened up a grenade and rifle on him. They said he was hit multiple times. And I was down in Roanoke, Virginia, and they had went out to my house like 3 o'clock in the morning, and my daughter-in-law was still up, and she looked out and she said to my son, said, "Oh my Lord," she called them soldiers. You know, Marines don't like to be called soldiers. Out in the yard. And he went out and he said, "Is Adam dead?" He said, "I got to talk to Miss Johnson." He said, "But is he dead?" He said, "I have to talk to Miss Johnson." Well, my son was no dummy. He knew what. And he said, "Well, Mom lives next door. Let me get my key because she has a bad heart, and I'll go with you." When he went around the house, my car wasn't there. And so he goes back over to his house and calls my sister over here. And she told him I was in Virginia, so they notified the Marines in Roanoke. And they came out to my daughter's house, which they got out there about 7:30 Sunday morning. And that was the most horrible news I ever got in my life. And I got just numb, and I was that way for months. You know, like nothing could touch me. And it just a big shock. They said, they came out to the house and said, asked me if I'd accept a partial body. I said, "What do you mean?" I just knew he didn't have no legs or no arms. And he said, "If you don't, they will store him until they find it. Where the bullet went in here or whatever it is, and come out the back, a little patch of flesh was missing." I said, "You bring my boy home. He's been here long enough."
Live my time with dying. Don't want nobody to moan. All I want for you to do is to take my body home. Well.
Every holiday, whatever, you know, like I had the green and white up here for St. Patrick's Day. Now I got red, white, and blue, which was Memorial Day. This is the flag that flew over the barracks in Iraq, and when he was killed, they took it down after he was buried, and all his company, they signed it. And when they came back from Iraq, I met them down at Camp Lejeune, and they presented it to me.
Name's Chad Peterson. I met Adam in the 3rd grade. We went to elementary school together at Midway.
My name's David Johnson. I met Adam Crumpler in about 7th grade.
My name's Jeremy Carter, and I first met Adam, to be honest, I can't tell you the first time because we was young. It was early elementary school.
During middle school, we just always was together and always done just about everything, and it wasn't really that hard to coax each other into doing crazy stuff.
Yeah, in high school, we got into a little bit of trouble. Not much, but I facilitated Adam a little bit in his skipping habits. So we helped with that. I was the first one to have a car, so naturally we helped with that. But in high school, it all became about the girls and the hanging out. And
got his grandmother's car stuck in about 3 foot of mud down by my dad's house, and had to get my dad to pull us out. Just anything crazy teenagers do, we done it.
I remember when 9/11 happened, I was in AP sociology class, and Adam was in that class with me. He was not supposed to be in that class, but he skipped his class and he was in there with me goofing off. And I remember him and I having a conversation about how he wished he could have been there and helped. And I know that he meant that, and I know that if he could have been, he would have been. And he definitely makes me proud for what he's done. And with 9/11, I know that the environment, so to speak, was at school. Everybody was scared. Everybody wanted to go home. You know, there was talk about, are we going to close the school? Are we not going to close the school?
You know, when they finally did let us out of class, then, you know, I did see Adam in the hallway, and he was pretty excited. I mean, not, you know, joyous excited, but, you know, to me, I kind of seen it in his eyes that he had found a purpose. You know, he had found a goal. You know, he knew what he wanted to do, and you know, he was going to do his best to go and try to make this right, and that's what he done.
When he left, you know, it was kind of, you know, it's coming, so you want to enjoy all the extra time and stuff that you did, and we really stepped up the pranking, you know, trying to fit it all in at the end. But
I had moved out of town. I had just got back, and you know, I had actually been fishing all day. And one of my, you know, when I had come up from the water finally, then, you know, one of my friends, you know, had been out looking for me, and, you know, stopped and, you know, told me, and I was just, first it was shock and disbelief, and, you know, and then you go into, well, you know, this ain't real, you know, I have to wake up. And then, you know, and then it finally sunk in, and, you know, I just went home, and, you know, I cried. You know, I thought about it, and then the first thing I did was, you know, I came down the road and I found, you know, everybody else. I found the rest of our friends, and, you know, from then on we was all through it. You know, we all went through it together. We was all there for each other, and, you know, that's the way Adam would have wanted it.
Well, I remember when I first got the call, I was actually asleep, and I think it was my friend Shelby's mother called and told me. And I, you know, being half asleep, I didn't know what was going on and had no clue about if it was real, you know, and it took a day or so for it to actually hit me, and it was pretty devastating because, you know, we were pretty close.
When I got the news that Adam had passed, I actually was living down in Putnam County. I had moved out of here after Adam had enlisted a few years after that. And as Grandma mentioned, her son, who is friends with my dad, called him, and he came and got me, and I was working night shift the night before, and I got up, and I was just almost in shock, you know, and I wanted to make sure that what I heard was correct. So I called my friends, you know, and the ones that I could get a hold of, they all knew, and it was heartbreaking. And I got on the internet and I looked, and, you know, and there it was, and I literally I was in tears, you know, because he is my brother. And although our group had been, or I had been separated a little bit from living down there, when I came back we were still one family, and we were all there, and it was like we had never separated. And Adam was he was kind of the glue that held us together, so to speak. And even to this day, he still does.
Shortly after it happened, I, you know, thought, because, you know, I wanted to honor him in some way, and, you know, so I figured that, you know, that I'd just go get a tattoo for him. So, you know, my cousin was a tattoo artist, so, you know, I went and, you know, told him, you know, it's like, look, you know everything, you know, I want a tattoo. So we went through and, you know, we picked everything out, and it was actually my first tattoo, and, you know, it's probably the one I'm the proudest of. You know, I have many, but, you know, it's the one I'm proudest of, and, you know, people, you know, still to this day, complete strangers see it and stop and ask about it. And so to me, then it's an everyday reminder, you know, every day when I wake up in the morning, I look down and, you know, there he is. So I know that I'll never forget him. Even when I do get old and, you know, lose my memory, I'll always have him right there. So I will never forget, and it does make me real proud when somebody does ask, because then I get to tell them his story, and, you know, to me it helps his memory live on.
I think he would want to be remembered as the guy that was funny. He had a great sense of humor and honorable, honest, and of course, a warrior. And he would want to be remembered as the person that was always there for somebody no matter what they needed or when they needed it, and somebody who loved his country and was full of pride for his country and wanted to fight and protect his country.
Staff Sergeant Jeremy A. Brown lost his life on July 3, 2005, from injuries sustained when his Humvee rolled over. Staff Sergeant Brown was on his second tour in Iraq. Sergeant Brian Kareem, at the age of 22, was killed on December 13, 2005, when an IED exploded near his Humvee while conducting operations in Taji. Sergeant Kareem's unit was on their second deployment within a year. On January 26, 2006, Sergeant Matthew D. Hunter was killed when his dismounted patrol was hit by an IED near Baghdad. Sergeant Hunter was a medic with the feared 101st Airborne Division. Sergeant Hunter received his nursing degree from West Liberty University and treated animals as well as soldiers while deployed. Corporal William B. Fawkes lost his life on May 18, 2006, from multiple wounds received in combat. Corporal Fawkes was wounded in a shootout with insurgents where he and his fellow Marines circled their vehicles in defense from attack.
My name is Kim Adams. I'm the mother of Corporal Brad Cox. He was a boy. He liked to play all sports, basketball. He played football from Little League up to high school, softball, baseball, wrestling, everything. He graduated with honors, top in his class, very outgoing person, had lots of friends. Well, after 9/11, he was going to Marshall and he decided he wanted to do his part in the 9/11. So that led him leaving Marshall University and then joining the Marine Corps. At first, when he was so happy when he graduated from Parris Island. He then got his orders and he went to Afghanistan, and when he came back from Afghanistan, he said, "Mom, I want to try out for the recon part, the reconnaissance, which is a very, very rigorous training. You have to try out. They just pick a few." He made it, went through rigorous training, Georgia jump school, Maine shooting school. He went to Virginia Beach amphibious training, just constant, very rigorous training, and flew by with flying colors. I think in Afghanistan it was just basic. That was his first tour. I'm sure there was lots of things he's seen and didn't think he would touch upon. The other tour when he was in Iraq, it was more intense. A lot of fighting over there. At Iraq he was with the reconnaissance, which he wasn't with in Afghanistan, so it was a whole different ballgame. On May 1st, I went to work just like usual, and my ex-husband had called home, and my husband was home with our grandbaby. My daughter lived with us then, and he said, "Your ex-husband's called and you need to come home." And I'm like, "What do you mean I need to come home?" He says, "You need to come home, the Marines are at his house." And I'm like, I'm asking people at work, Marines just don't show up at your doorstep. So, so I have to leave. And so I left, went home. 10, 15 minutes later, they come and they tell me, "Your son's been severely injured." And I say, "What do you mean? Is he coherent? Can he, does he know where he's at?" "Ma'am, all we can tell you is that, he's severely injured." So, the next thing is, I've got to get to him. How can I get there? And at that point, they hadn't even flew him to Germany. Days later, they flew him to Germany. He had a couple surgeries. He lost his right arm, lost one of his lungs. He was over 60% burnt. So they finally say, "Okay, we're going to, the government, the Marines, we're sending you to Germany." They come, we they take me all the way to Yeager Airport, and we get there, and they get a phone call, and they say, no, we're not sending her. We think we have him stable enough we can send him back. And I think that was like on a Wednesday. On Friday, they're sending me to Brooke Army Medical Center out in San Antonio. So I finally got to be with him like 5-6 days later. When we first got there, we were taken to the base, and they were asking me, "Are you so and so?" When we say no, and come to find out that was Brad's buddy. He had died in flight on the way to Brooke, and so I met a lot of new people automatically. Mothers, crying on each other's shoulders, trying to, is my son okay? Because they made you wait. They had to clean him up and evaluate him and all that stuff before we could see him. He did, every day was. It was like a roller coaster because, we would think he was doing good, and they say he's stable and doing well. Next day, we go in and say, we don't know that there's anything else that we can do. We're going to try something else. Just constantly, roller coaster ride. Finally, on the 18th of May, he passed. They weren't able to keep his blood pressure up anymore. And I think that morning my mom said that she thought he looked great, but I think he had already gone because when you looked at him, he just wasn't there. So he passed on May 18th. He was just at a point when he had so much potential, and all that was taken away very quickly, too soon. He is a true American hero in my eyes, and I would hope that everybody would think the same.
On August 25, 2006, Staff Sergeant Stephen A. Seal was killed in Baghdad. During this time, the violence in Baghdad was increasing daily. He was serving with the historic 101st Airborne Division when an IED exploded near his air assault patrol. Petty Officer First Class Jeffrey S. Taylor was killed when his Chinook helicopter was shot down on June 28, 2005, which was depicted in the recent movie Lone Survivor. Petty Officer Taylor was serving with SEAL Team 10. Taylor made the ultimate sacrifice while on a rescue mission to save lives of his brothers in arms during Operation Red Wings. Staff Sergeant Robert F. White died from a gunshot wound on September 26, 2005 from small arms fire when his mounted patrol was engaged by enemy forces. White was part of the combat-tested 82nd Airborne Red Falcons of the 1st Battalion, tasked to provide security for Afghanistan national parliamentary elections.
We got the word that they needed some extra security to help facilitate these elections in Afghanistan.
This is the first for me, yes. I think it's kind of unique just to see the way they work and the way we work, and we all try to fit in together and accomplish our mission, and it's going well so far.
Having presence that deters the enemy, that tells the enemy clearly that they will be gambling on the wrong side. They'll be taking a really bad chance if they come and try to challenge the paratroopers and disrupt the elections.
We'd like to be home before Christmas. It all depends on how these elections go. We realize we have a mission here, but for a lot of these men, it'd be the first Christmas home in over 2 years, so we're looking forward to that, hopefully.
Despite having only a battalion-sized force to secure the area the size of Vermont, the Red Falcons provided support for a violence-free election.
I am Shirley White. I am the mother of Robert Frank White.
I'm Stan White, Harold S. White, father of Robert White.
I also am president of the West Virginia Gold Star Mothers Association, an organization that tries to keep our children's memory alive. When he attended middle school, it was actually Lincoln Junior High School. That's before it was changed over to Stonewall. So he attended school there and was very active with the band, a drummer, and then went to Stonewall High School. And when we moved, then he moved to Nighter High School. And his senior year there, he was just a regular student. He didn't participate in the athletics or the band or anything while he was there. Bob's desire from a very early age was to be part of the military. I'm not exactly sure what that drive, or where that drive started, but that was his ambition. And his ambition was not just to join the military, but to jump out of airplanes.
His role there, he was sent there, his unit was sent there during the elections. He left in July, I believe, of 2005, and he was there to help monitor elections, make sure that they weren't disrupted and all those type things. And there wasn't a lot of military action that we were aware of going on at that time. So, we worried about him, but we weren't overly concerned. We sort of thought it was like any other mission. And of course, we were saddened and shocked when he did get to where he was killed. His convoy was attacked by a RPG, I believe it was, rocket propelled grenade, hit the Humvee, and he was the only casualty. The others were hurt, but he was the only one that died.
I think all of the 37 are unique. They were average West Virginians, but they were all unique and special to their families. And they, at least in Bob's perspective, Bob wasn't doing anything special. He was doing what his job was, and he enjoyed doing that. The military was his life. But to me and to the other Gold Star mothers, our children were our heroes. We lost a very important part of our lives when we lost our children.
Military leaders convinced the President and the Secretary of Defense that the only way to really get through Iraq was to beef up the forces and put more people in there so that they could manage the different cities that they were fighting in and having to do this door-to-door or building-to-building activities. And when you put more people into harm's way, they were able to stimulate more IEDs, and more people were actually in the area to be killed or to become casualties of IEDs and that type of fighting. So the buildup of the forces did two things. It caused us to have more casualties, but it also sped up the process of being able to clear these towns and cities in Iraq and to get us out of Iraq.
In January 2007, General David Petraeus and General Stanley McChrystal brought their plan of the surge into action. 150,000 troops scheduled to rotate out were kept on deployment in Iraq, and an additional 20,000 troops were brought in to break the back of insurgency, focusing on Iraq's capital, Baghdad. Private Michael Slater was killed in Iraq on April 21st, 2007. Slater was with the 82nd Airborne Division. He was only 19 years old when he made the ultimate sacrifice for his country.
My name is Patricia Polly, and I am Michael Slater's mother.
And I'm Jessica Johnson, his sister.
Michael was at one point short for his age, and so he got a little bit of rough time sometimes. And Michael wanted to join the Army from the time he was 19. He worried he wouldn't be tall enough. We took him to a growth specialist. They said, we can't do anything to make him taller, but he ended up growing 3 more inches. And he was very buff, and he weighed 147 pounds when he passed. But he was little growing up, and he had a little bit of a hard time, but he loved life. He was only in there, it was 11 months, I believe, and he decided to go airborne, 82nd Airborne. And I remember when he left basic training, I was at the beach, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Mom," he said, "I've decided to go airborne. What do you think?" I said, "No brainer, that's a desert." But he loved it. He basically there was driving a truck. He was supplying things to build and supplies.
He was hauling those concrete barricades, like you see in the interstate.
He was doing that.
And that's what killed him.
He kind of felt, he said, "Mom, I don't think I'm going to make it home." You know, that's what
he told me the same thing. And I talked to him on April the 1st, and it was early in the morning for us because it wasn't for them. And he said, "The news makes it sound way worse than what it is," and he said, "Everything's okay. I go to chapel as much as I can."
I was told 2 different stories, but I think it was an accident. They were trying to get it ready for the next day, and Michael was done for the day, and this is not uncommon for Michael. When the guy says, "My back's hurting," he said, "Oh, forget it, I'll do it." And he was ejected from the truck, supposedly, and they were double loaded, and he was crushed, and I don't understand the rest of what happened to his body. Everybody in this neighborhood respected him. At his funeral, they lined the whole 2 miles of the cemetery, plus the place was packed. He would want to be remembered. He was proud to be there. He was proud to be honoring his country. He was proud. He was just tickled to death he was in the Army. And most guys would have called their girlfriends and got in trouble. Nah, he called his mom.
I would say he'd like you to pay it forward, because he'd give you a shirt off his back.
Staff Sergeant Stanley B Reynolds was killed near the Anbar province in Iraq when the Chinook helicopter he was on went down. Reynolds died on August 14, 2007, along with 4 other service members. Specialist Jason Marchand was killed by IED when he was conducting routine checks in a neighborhood just north of Baghdad on October 5, 2007.
I'm Debbie Parson. I'm Jason's mom. We lived out in the country, but as he growed up, we did different things. We lived on a farm. He worked in hay fields and stuff, and as he grew older, he did football and track. He loved it. So he said, "Mom, I'm joining the military." I said, "What?" So he went into infantry and airborne, and that's what he did. And so, but he loved jumping out of airplanes. Oh my God, did he love it. First time he jumped out of a plane, he said, "Mom, my helmet fell off. I fell on my head." I said, "Oh my gosh, Jason." And then how I knew he was going to, getting ready to go to Iraq, he called me on August the 10th, getting ready to board. My birthday's on August the 12th, and he started singing happy birthday to me. And I said, "Jason," he said, "Mommy, I know when your birthday is." And I knew he was getting ready to go to, I knew he was going around to Iraq, but I didn't know, he couldn't tell me when, but he was singing happy birthday to me. And I was practicing with the Majorettes Color Guard, and I started calling, and all the girls knew what was going on. And he said, "Mommy, I just called to sing happy birthday to you." And I knew he was boarding the plane to head for Iraq. He was out front in rear line, and he was in a house, and his sergeant, here's the commander, called me and said, "Oh, we learned a lot from your son. We seen handprints on the wall." And he said, "We always knew it was booby trap, and we knew not to send our soldiers." I said, "Oh, it took my son to get killed for you not to send anybody else in the house? Thank you very much." Because there was handprints all over the wall, and they knew the house was booby trapped after Jason and Sergeant Malott got killed. I said, gee, thanks a lot. It took my son and Sergeant Malott to get killed for to not send anybody else, just to go blow the houses up. Thanks, I really appreciated that. Wade said, there was no sergeant and there was no commander around. We was in the next house, and when they heard the house blow up, Wade was the first one right beside Jason, and they drug him out. And they said, they said that Jason and them was still alive, and he said, tell my mom and everybody else we love him. He said, Jason and them wasn't alive. They said they got killed right off, and he said the commander and them lied to us. Yep, he left on August the 10th, and he got killed in October. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the date, August the 10th, when he left. They come to your house, and we seen him come up the road, and I flagged him down. I said, I heard you're looking for me. And he said, yeah, we've got to go back to your house. So we head back to my house, and I put in the driveway. He said, we got to go in the house. I said, no, you're going to tell me my driveway, what do you want me for? And I knew what they was going to tell me. I said, no, you got to tell me right here. You're not taking me in my house. They said, man, we got to tell your son, Jason. First, Jason got promoted to corporal, and they said, Corporal Jason Marchand was killed this morning. And I looked down, and I stood there and screamed, and I fell backwards, and Shanda caught me. She was just a little thing. And I called Richard on the phone. I said, Richard, you got to get back here with Savannah. And so I wouldn't tell him on the phone. He said, Mom, you got to tell me now. I said, we'll not tell you nothing until you get back here with Savannah. 2 weeks before that, Savannah's little friend got killed in a car wreck. Her best friend in the world, and his mother. So when we got her in the house, Richard put her on her lap and said, Savannah, we got to tell you something. And Richard put her on her lap and was trying to tell her what happened. And I left the room because and then finally I came back in, and I said, well, he stood there and he started to start cussing his chaplain out. And I said, Richard, watch your mouth. And the chaplain said, we've heard worse than that. I said, you just cussed 2 chaplains out, Richard. And I said, he said, Savannah, you remember 2 weeks ago when your little friend died? She said, yeah. He said, well, Daddy just died this morning. She said, my daddy went to heaven? She said, my daddy's an angel? She said, yeah. She said, yeah.
On November 7th, 2007, West Virginia lost its first commissioned officer to the War on Terror. Captain Benjamin D. Tiffner passed away from fatal wounds he received from an IED while on a convoy in Baghdad. Captain Tiffner was the leader of an elite team assigned to 5th Special Forces Group. In 1996, he was nominated by Senator Robert Byrd to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point.
As the Afghanistan portion of the war started, and then it later escalated on to Iraq, every unit in the West Virginia National Guard was deployed. Both our air wings and every Army National Guard unit except for the band. The only people we had left in the West Virginia National Guard in the state of West Virginia was the 249th Army Band. And I took them to Camp Dawson with a special AT and taught them how to run engineer equipment, loaders, dump trucks, because as everybody knows, every year we have floods in the state of West Virginia. And so with every unit gone, we had to depend on the band to be able to help the citizens of the state of West Virginia in times of domestic emergencies, of floods. And sure enough, early spring it flooded over in Logan, and I had the band deployed over to Logan County helping the residents of Logan get cleaned up. But due to that situation, we had a lot of meetings with the National Guard Bureau and the people that planned this war. And we decided that we would never do that to any states again, and we would try to have no more than 1/3 of the National Guard from any one state at a time to be deployed overseas in this global war on terror, so that you would have enough members left in the state to take care of the domestic emergencies that happen in the States while they're deployed trying to fight wars.
Specialist Daniel Merringer from Morgantown was killed on April 27, 2007 in Afghanistan. Sadly, 7 years after his death, the military has still not released the details surrounding his death. The official report is still under investigation. According to his fellow unit members, was proud to be a member of the 82nd Airborne Division and wanted to make the military his career. On September 29, 2008, Sergeant First Class Jamie S. Nicholas, an elite Green Beret, was killed while conducting mounted operations in Afghanistan when his vehicle was targeted by an IED. Sergeant First Class Nicholas was with the 1st Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group. The Taliban targeted his vehicle because of his fierce reputation amongst the local enemy forces.
I'm Karen Nicholas, Jamie's mother.
And I am Mark Nicholas, Jamie's father.
He behaved himself all well through school and everything. I had good grades, but then high school was a different story. Hit his rebellious years there. Grew his hair out. It was short on one side, stuck up here, was long on this side, had his ears pierced. When he came home with the 3rd piercing, I was like, son, I can handle 2 piercings, but not 3. Got to get rid of one of them. Okay, Mom. Toward the end of his junior year, he started trying harder at school, attending more, got better grades. Senior year, really worked hard. And we knew at this time he already wanted to go into the service, but one day I had asked him, Jamie, what happened? Why are you doing so much better now than you were? And he's like, Mom, I decided that if I was going to get out of this place, I had to straighten up and get my act together and get my diploma if I wanted to be able to do anything. So he did, and he graduated, and like I said, he had already made his plans to go into the service. His father was in the service. That probably influenced what he chose to do. Plus, we watched an awful lot of G.I. Joe growing up. These boys all had tremendous amounts of G.I. Joe toys. He went into the service in August of 1994 is when he joined the service. Jamie was up in Alaska at that time. Jamie did cold weather training up there, and I think that's where he decided at that time that he wanted to apply to the Special Forces operations to see about becoming a Green Beret, and he put his paperwork in and everything. And then from Alaska he went to Fort Bragg to do his Special Forces training. Jamie was like the ultimate soldier. I remember when he was stationed in Fort Campbell that he was up for promotion or something, and one of his superiors had said, give me 6 more like him and I can take the war, conquer the war. You know, he was the ultimate soldier. And he went into Special Forces. Everybody has a different MOS, and he was a weapons sergeant. But Jamie was the type that wanted to be prepared for everything. I come to the conclusion that it takes a special type of person to be a soldier and a special type of soldier to be a Green Beret. His nickname was the White Devil. They said he had no fear. They have seen him run up the hill first in the face of bullets, yelling, come on, let's go. The Afghani troop leader was not a big man, and Jamie had taught them how to bump fist. And this guy would like have to raise up to bump fist with Jamie because of his build and everything. And then when he found out that he was going back again, I had a horrible feeling from the very beginning about him going. And he left
He left in May of that year, and he come home to visit, and I got to see him and everything. And he was supposed to leave in November, I think it was. So I said my prayers every day for him. But I knew that he would not come back that time. When he was killed, he was killed on September the 29th, but on September the 28th, we had, Burke and I come home from church that day, and this cemetery where he's buried, it was in the fall of the year, and we always like to go out through there, and I'm like, hey, let's go out to the cemetery, and maybe we'll see some squirrels. And there had been a really bad storm that spring, and I wanted, and we knew that some trees had fallen down, and we just wanted to go and see what it was like. So we walked out to the cemetery, and there was like 3 big trees across the road and everything. And when we come back, Mom and Dad were here, and they were like, "Wow, what's the road like out there?" And I said, "Oh, it needs some work on it. I hope nobody passes away anytime soon." Well, the next day, the Army comes to tell us that Jammie had been killed. They were taking Major Bush and 2 other guys down to a switchover station or something. And they were at Yak Chow in Afghanistan. This is down close to the Pakistani border. And Captain Cliff, Major Bush was actually leaving, and Captain Cliff was going to be taking over for him. And anyway, as they were getting ready to leave, Major Bush had told Jammie, said, "Be careful." Said, I feel bad about you all going back. Just don't feel right about this. And Jammie's like, "I'll see you later, bro." And they did a few more things, and a little bit later, Major Bush again told him, says, "Be careful. I'm concerned about this." And he's like, "I'll see you later, bro." So they start back. They had, there was 2 Afghani trucks first, Jammie's Humvee, and then the other 2 Humvees that the rest of the Green Berets were in. And where he was killed at, the road forked, and the insurgents had set up bombs in either road. Didn't matter which way they went, they were going to get it. And they had the insurgents had a spotter over to the side. And so the first 2 Afghani trucks go through, and nothing happens, and Jammie's Humvee goes through, and of course they set off the IED then and caught them. Well, the guys in the other Humvees, at first they didn't think, they thought that they had been okay. And then they stopped, they set up their parameters and everything. They checked Jammie and them. Gary Vasquez was driving. He was probably killed from just the shock of the concussion. Captain Cliff lived for a few moments. And of course, Jammie, apparently he took the brunt of the IED blast, plus the 50 cal gun just come back and smashed into him and everything. So I'm sure he had no idea what happened to him whatsoever. For that, I count that as a major blessing, that his death was instant and everything. So anyway, they set up parameters, and anything that moved went down and everything. And of course they had to call in and wait for, I guess, whoever comes to help with this, however that goes, was what they did. So, but that was what happened. And like I said, this picture here was taken about 30 minutes, maybe an hour at the most, before that incident happened there. I pray for all of our soldiers that the Lord will keep them in safety as much as He can, because this is a job, and He can't bring everybody back, that's it, but just that He protects them as He can. And then I pray for the families of all the soldiers who have been killed, that they will be comforted and be able to heal and move on with their lives. And then I say my prayers for the soldiers who have been wounded, both mentally and physically, that they will get the help that they need. My older son and I were just talking the other day, and do you realize that there have been more soldiers who
have returned have committed suicide now than the ones who have been killed in the war. That is sad. And they are not getting the help that they need. And I think this would bother Jammie tremendously. But Jammie was proud of everything that he had accomplished. We had talked one time, and he had said, "Mom, we can either fight them here or we can fight them in our front yard. America needs to choose where we're going to do it."
Chief Warrant Officer 4, Brent S. Cole, a true patriot, died May 22, 2009 in a helicopter crash during his 3rd combat deployment while proudly serving his country and protecting the Afghan people. He was deployed as part of the 1st Attack Helicopter Battalion, Wolfpack, of the 82nd Airborne Division's Combat Aviation Brigade. Warrant Officer Cole's actions and pilot skills during the accident directly resulted in the survival of his co-pilot, First Lieutenant Joshua Bones. Specialist Julian L. Beresford made the ultimate sacrifice on November 4, 2009, when his unit was attacked by insurgents using small arms and rocket-propelled grenade fire in the Burmal district, Afghanistan. Specialist Beresford was assigned to the 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 4th Brigade Combat Team Airborne, 25th Infantry Division. He was supposed to return home in November to celebrate his daughter's 1st birthday.
My name is Shelley Guthrie, and I'm Julian's mother. He went to college at West Liberty University and was majoring in parks and recreation. One day he come home and he said, "I spoke to a gentleman about joining the Army." And he tested very high on the entrance exam, I guess, and was kicking around some things and thought that that's what he wanted to do. We come from a long line of military people in our family. My father was a U.S. Marine in World War II. My brother was in the U.S. Army, Vietnam. Always very patriotic family, and it was instilled in Julian very young. He fell in love right before he left for basic training, and it was rough. It was very hard on him, but he went through it, and he was very proud of what he was doing. He was driven. He wanted to be a good soldier. That's what he wanted to do. Julian was the type of person that he never met a stranger. He wanted to make a difference. He's made difference with the community, the family, everyone. He would want everybody to remember him for the smile and the laugh and the fun times. He always made everybody feel better. That's what he'd want.
Our first date was actually on his birthday, and that was in June, and he had already signed up to go to the Army, and he was leaving in August, I believe. So we had about 2 months of actual time being together and pretty much spent every second we could together, being that he was leaving for Fort Benning. When he went to Fort Benning, we basically fell in love through letters. It's actually something I hold very, very dear to my heart because it was old-fashioned in a way. Like, you say certain things in letters and it's a different type of intimacy sort of thing. We were married in a very small wedding with just friends and family, and it was just kind of a whirlwind sort of thing. It was really cool. Looking back on it now, it's like I didn't get to spend the amount of time that I would have liked to, but I wouldn't have traded that for anything. One of the things that I absolutely love is when I was pregnant with our daughter, he was in a training in California, and he was supposed to come home for the birth, and he actually surprised me. He had 2 of his best friends come and pick him up, and we were down his mom's house, and I was extremely pregnant, and you know, they walked through the door, and I'm like, what is Michael and Eric doing here? And the next thing I know, he comes through the door. I mean, just completely a dirty mess, like covered. I mean, he hadn't taken a shower in days, and it was just like turning around and seeing him there was just, you know, it was an amazing thing. And that's just the smile on his face, and everybody else kind of knew what was going on except for me. So it was just it was a great feeling. In your head, you have so many ideas and things that you want to do whenever they get back, and all these plans, and everything's just shut down. You know, for so long when he was deployed, it's just, you just make plans and make plans. Whenever you get home, we'll do this and this and this, and when that happens, it's just like, where do you go from there? So it took a long time for me to grasp that idea of it's done, you know, like it's hard to move on from that when all you had is plans and plans and plans.
My name is Sergeant First Class Robert Nelson with the Company C, 1st of the 150th Aviation, based out of Wheeling, West Virginia. I was contacted by Fort Knox, I believe on 3 November, to be the notification officer for Specialist Beresford's death. And then I ended up being the assistance officer for the same case. What we get is very vague. He was on a routine patrol, and what I was given was he was insurgents attacked his platoon squad with small arms firing RPGs. I tell them all the time, the family, that it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my military career, and I've been doing this for 23 years.
My name is Michael Baker, and I was Julian's best friend from junior high until the day we lost him.
Sue Ventura, and I am his mother-in-law.
I'm Kelly Foster, and I am Julian's aunt. Shelley, of course, is my sister.
My name's Randy Foster, and my relationship to Julian is my uncle, and just been close throughout his whole life, really.
My name is Randy Joe Shavanack, and Julian was my cousin. We were raised more like brother and sister, but cousins.
He brought up that he was interested in going to the military. I thought it'd be a good fit for him. I mean, he was always pretty adventurous, intelligent. I think anything that he really set his mind to do, he ended up doing anyway. So, I mean, I think it was a good choice for him.
The first time I met him was at Gina's apartment. I went down there to meet him, and when I was there, I had mentioned to Gina about going to Oglebay to see the lorikeets, the birds, and he was like all for going to see the lorikeets, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a guy that actually wants to go see parakeets.
He and my daughter are actually 4 months apart, and they were raised like a set of twins.
We went through the Christmases and the Easters and the holidays and the summers and the vacations, Myrtle Beach, and where we tried to go whenever I was working. So that's basically where it was, you know, his childhood was just about like any other kid's childhood.
Julian and I were 4 months apart. He was born in June, I was in October. Brother and sister. We genuinely, if I had it in pink, he had it in blue.
When he came back home, he was a little bit different. I mean, he was just squared away. And I remember another one of our friends and I went to pick him up at the Pittsburgh airport when he came home for Maya's birthday. And I'll never forget that time when I saw him coming off the airplane. It was just like, I know that's my friend, but it was just, he'd changed, you know what I mean? He'd grown into a soldier. It was pretty neat to see.
He was very patriotic. I remember at the picnic they had before he left, he was wearing a red, white, and blue Uncle Sam hat and a shirt with peace and he just was always a really patriotic guy.
whenever 9/11 happened, he for somebody that age, he took it pretty serious. With his grandpa being in the service and then his uncle being in the service, and he kept mentioning the service, and I kept trying to mention not the service. And he tried other, he tried other things, tried the aeronautical school and stuff like that. But 9/11 did have an effect on him. There's no doubt about it.
I was in class with him at our high school, and came across the intercom that a plane had just hit the tower, and it was devastating. It's a moment nobody will ever forget. He actually considered signing up at that point, and I was like, this is crazy, you can't do this, and he didn't. That wasn't when he joined, but he did consider at that time. It was just very emotional.
He started looking into enlisting at that point in time, and a little more than what I thought he was. Okay, but then he kept telling me that he kept thinking about it, and then I remember the day that he did tell me that he had signed, and we were actually going to a local restaurant to get breakfast. And I had a few things to say that I told him it wasn't a video game. This was for real. And he said he knew that. So,
my husband and I, actually, his family home that I moved into when we were married is at the end of this lane. And I called my mother to check on Gina and Maya and her. And I had forgotten to tell her something, so I called her right back. And it was just screaming, loud screaming. And she said, there's two. And I knew, at that point what that meant when there was two. So it was November. I was in shorts and a t-shirt headed to bed, and I ran about a quarter of a mile, half a mile from there to here. And that's when I hit the front door and I saw Sergeant Nelson. I will never forget it.
This is like stuff you hear on the news all the time about, people having sons and uncles killed in Afghanistan, and now it's us. But, we stuck together as a family, and we got through it, and it was difficult. Sergeant Nelson was a godsend. He really was.
We, of course, were expecting Julian to come home. He was due to come home. He should have been home for his daughter's first birthday. And so we had actually gotten a banner that we got through online. Actually, Sue, his mother-in-law, had found a website where we could get banners free for men and women who are serving overseas. And so we had it made, and it welcomed him home. And we had it put in the front yard, of course, for when he did come home in 2 weeks. But 2 weeks before he was due to come home, he was killed. And I couldn't take the banner down, and it stayed in my front yard for years. And then we finally decided it was time to kind of move it. So we moved it up on the hill, and it still is there today. It's quite weather beaten.
It completely changed the way I thought about things. I mean, when you're cruising through life and everything just seems like run of the mill, like I never experienced a loss like that. I've never had anything ripped away from me like that. And to lose a friend so suddenly, it was, it was. So I mean, I definitely don't take things for granted, and that's, I just look at it, one day at a time, and just appreciate everything that you have.
Grief in itself is something that you can't put into words. Everybody has their own idea of what it should be or the way that you should do things. And the truth is, everyone's different. This is something that everyone experiences individually. You can't even really lump a family together because every single person is grieving in a completely different way.
Over the years, I don't think in my personal opinion, I don't ever get over it. You just learn to deal with it. And I know that it's affected all of us here. We've all become closer. It was tough at first. It was really tough. There was just so many emotions gone from everybody. But yeah, it has over the few years. It's really brought us really closer. I mean, a lot closer, and a lot closer in a lot of other ways. I believe we'll in my heart, we'll see him again.
No matter how often people talk about it or how often they don't, we will always remember him. He is in almost every conversation that we have, like he's still here today, and it's never going to change. Never.
Sergeant First Class Dwayne A. Thornsberry died on September 12, 2009 from the injuries he sustained when his vehicle rolled over. We spoke with 3 of his fellow Green Berets who cannot be identified by picture or voice for national security reasons, as these brave warriors deploy constantly to accomplish the most dangerous and secretive missions on Earth.
Sergeant First Class Thornsberry was on an ODA that worked for my company. I think the first time I saw him, he had a weapon in hand and he was performing a PMCS on his weapon. And I think probably the biggest thing about SFC Thornsberry that I can say is sometimes after an incident like that, you can tell what kind of a guy he was by the reaction of the other guys. And we had, after the incident, we actually had an E8 that no longer could perform his job because the incident had such an impact on him. We also had to stand the team for a couple days because the impact that Sergeant Thornsberry had on the team was huge. They lost a true friend, a buddy, a leader, and he was missed so bad. And very rarely does that happen. So it speaks of volumes towards what Sergeant Thornsberry brought to the team.
I met Tony on a rotation to Iraq. My team was in Baghdad as well as his, and we ended up doing quite a few missions together. I know through conversations with the rest of the members of the team that he spoke of a lot of difficulties coming up with his family, with the situation, the way of his life in West Virginia. And I think that one of the things that took away with all my conversations with guys on the team was that Tony took that and he wanted to make it positive. Tony was an exceptional soldier. He was always positive, always upbeat, and always focused. I remember when we were waiting for missions at times, we would all be playing Xbox or PlayStation, it was just good times. And as soon as it was go time, we all switched to business. Tony was exceptional at that. After Tony was killed, I was specifically put onto that team to assist in the rebuilding and mending of the team after. And I knew almost everybody on that team. They were friends of mine. And so it was difficult as a leader, coming to the team and trying to comfort, console these guys, while at the same time maintaining focus.
I met Tony in the beginning of 2008. That was right when I showed up to group. He was the senior weapons sergeant on the team. On duty, he was more like a guy who took you under his wing on the side, would tell you something that maybe somebody else wouldn't tell you, and let you learn it on your own. Off duty, he was a single guy with a lot of girlfriends, but he wanted a wife and kids eventually. He wanted to get the girl, win the princess, and have a family. And unfortunately, he never got the opportunity to do that. He was a life of the party kind of guy. He had this really, really deep redneck twang. His West Virginia came out of him even more so when he got a few drinks in him. And he loved to drink his beer and he loved Jack Daniels. And he was a stellar Green Beret. I think his biggest inspiration was deploying and seeing the bearded SF guy. That guy had the cool gear with the cool guns and the cool beard. And he was coming in the gate from somewhere that nobody knows. He was like, I want to be that guy. When it comes to the specific incident where he lost his life, everything's been declassified. It was a pretty average mission with a pretty large target set. We were in a large convoy. And unfortunately, after crossed a homemade tire bridge, basically a bridge of tires, dirt, and sandbags, going into a small village, his 6th vehicle was the one that tripped it. And the whole side of the bridge came down. It just pancaked the vehicle. And Tony was always on the minigun, so it was the minigun truck. The truck with the most weight in the back. And he was kind of a short dude, so I think he might have been crouched up against the bird nest. But it flipped, pancaked right on top of him. So he didn't have a whole lot of chance there. And he'd suffered multiple system trauma. Between a broken back, several wounds to the chest, collapsed lungs, suffered a pretty bad femur fracture, and an unstable pelvis. And, a plethora of who knows what else is going on inside. So he had a pretty rough go for a few minutes there. He ended up taking his last breaths there, on the back of the bird on the way out. At the time, I was only a medic on the mission, so he was my casualty as soon as he went down. As soon as I got to him, we got him out from under the truck. It was game on. When it comes to trauma, he was the first person that I'd ever worked on outside of a hospital, and the first American I've ever worked on in that kind of situation. So it was a steep curve immediately, you know? Having one of your best friends, one of your brothers, in a ditch dying and trying to figure out how to save him. And you know that you're the only guy that can. I treated everything I could. I did everything I can to keep him going. But in the end, he stomped on me.
Specialist David A. Hess, a proud mountaineer, was killed in Afghanistan on October 10, 2010. Hess served with the feared 101st Airborne.
My name's Kathy Dowler, and I am the mother of Specialist David Hess. David was born in Charleston, then we moved to Parkersburg. He went to school in Parkersburg, West Virginia, from kindergarten all the way to where he graduated. He played football, he wrestled from when he was 4 years old up to a senior of high school. He pole vaulted track. We come basically from a military family. Most of my brothers and sisters were in the military, all Army. So he enjoyed it. He decided to go, after he went through his basic and AIT, decided to go airborne. So he went through the training for airborne and then ended up being stationed at Fort Campbell, the 101st Airborne. David called me every Saturday morning from Afghanistan between the hours of 5 and 7. And I would be sitting outside with the phone, drinking my coffee, waiting on his call. We had planned to go four-wheeler riding with some friends that afternoon. That morning about 11. People started showing up to go riding, and I wouldn't go because I hadn't received my call from him yet. And so finally about 1 o'clock we left, and I guess the military had showed up just right after we left looking for me. And of course I was out riding four-wheelers. We got back about 5:30 that evening, and the military vehicle was sitting in the parking lot of my business. And I told my boyfriend at the time, I said, "Don't stop." I said, "They're here to tell me that David's no longer with us." And he said, "You don't know that." He said he could have just been hurt or something. I said, "No, I've known all day long." And he went ahead and stopped, and they told me that he was killed that morning. The report said that on October 10th, they were given orders to escort a team to Milan, Afghanistan, and they crossed a wire, a CWIED, and then when they traveled on down and they got to the bridge, and that's where the IED exploded. Him and another soldier, David Weigel, was killed, and there was like 6 others that were severely injured. Our military does a wonderful job, and they just, it's a job. He was good at what he done, and he paid the ultimate sacrifice for it. This is Haley, my granddaughter. This is David's daughter. Haley lives in Lakeland, Florida, and she comes and spends the summer with me. She did last year and this year.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden. It was nearly 10 years ago. The images of 9/11 are seared into our national memory. And yet we know that the worst images are those that were unseen to the world. The empty seat at the dinner table, children who were forced to grow up without their mother or their father, parents who would never know the feeling of their child's embrace. On September 11th, 2001, in our time of grief, the American people came together. On that day, no matter where we came from, what God we prayed to, or what race or ethnicity we were united as one American family. We were also united in our resolve. A small team of Americans carried out the operation with extraordinary courage and capability. No Americans were harmed. They took care to avoid civilian casualties. After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
Private First Class Andrew M. Harper died on March 11, 2011, from injuries sustained in a non-combat incident when his vehicle rolled over in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Private First Class Harper was a vehicle gunner, which is one of the Army's most dangerous jobs. Chief Petty Officer Nicholas H. Knoll, a Navy SEAL, died August 6, 2011 when his Chinook helicopter was hit by an RPG while conducting a night raid in Wardak, Afghanistan. His helicopter was shot down while reinforcing a unit of Rangers who were under enemy fire. Chief Petty Officer Knoll was one of the 38 killed in the crash. On June 29, 2011, West Virginia suffered its last casualty to date in Iraq. Captain David E. Van Camp was killed in a rocket attack that struck his base camp. He was the commander of Grimm Troop, 2nd Squadron, 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, serving on his second deployment. Just months after his death, on the morning of December 18, 2011, the few remaining U.S. combat troops in Iraq crossed the border into Kuwait, ending another phase of U.S. military operations in Iraq.
Today, I can report that, as promised, after nearly 9 years, America's war in Iraq will be over.
After 13 years of fighting, President Obama, determined to bring our troops home, announced plans to end the deployment of our service members. As these plans are put into action, new threats in the war on terror have emerged. As there is no clear end to the fighting, freedom and liberty will always be protected by proud West Virginians.
Sometimes living that freedom, you forget that people paid the ultimate price so that you could do that. And so documenting these 37 people and telling their stories, I think, is a tribute to their families and for what they represent and for what the state of West Virginia represents to the nation as far as our service to keep that freedom alive.
I put my uniform on, lace my boots tight, so when you lay down to sleep tonight, you know you'll be okay. And I don't care what you've